Awesome. Scott Royal Smith with Royal Legal Solutions. He is an active real estate investor, as you guys may have assumed. He's also an asset protection attorney. His company helps over 2,000 clients nationwide, all different type of asset classes and different businesses. Scott, I'm glad you are choosing to spend your time on the show today, and you also got the memo for the blood orange shirt so we could match a little bit.
Oh, dude, you got to color coordinate. That's really number one key to success, as it comes into
Yeah.
it. But no, in all seriousness, it's really my pleasure to come in and talk with you today, Carlos. Royal Legal Solutions and myself, we're really founded on this principle of saying, let's just share all the information.
Love
Pull
it.
back the curtain, share all the secrets from everything about asset protection, tax, estate planning. How do you make money through real estate? How do you do things a smart way that are repeatable? You can actually manufacture success, right? What success takes in these games is actually there's a way to do it that's time tested, that if you just do things the right way, that you have the results, and you don't actually need to be that smart or that creative to have amazing success in these types of businesses. So happy to share with you some of what I've learned over the last 6 years, helping a couple thousand clients all over the country. So I'm an open book for you, brother.
Love and appreciate it, man. I guess tell me, how did you get into real estate and asset protection?
Yeah, so I actually started real estate investing when I was in law school. I bought an active transmission and auto repair shop, the business and the building, during my second year of law school. I ended up flipping it after law school to be the only people in law school with me and my partner to graduate from law school without debt. Thanks to that work.
Nice.
I didn't sleep a lot for those couple of years, right? but after that, that's where I kind of fell in love with it. And I was a litigator after I got out of law school, and I was really good at it. But I never stopped real estate investing. And eventually I left litigation because I was making more money doing my real estate investing than I was being an attorney. So I said, well, the heck with being an attorney. And then built and achieved my own financial freedom through my real estate investing first. And along the way, I probably ran into a lot of things that you and everybody listening to this podcast is running into, which is, how do you build these things the right way? How do you build a business? How do you build an active portfolio? How do you make sure they're protected? How do you anonymize the assets? How do you make cash flows work for your banking, your accounting, your insurance? All of these sundry pieces that nobody ever taught me about, because they only taught me about how to make money at the asset level. They didn't teach me how to run the business behind it. So I built that for myself of here's how I do the entity structuring, here's how I do the estate planning and the tax. And then when I was going to meetup groups, people started asking me, Scott, what are you doing? How are you doing this? How do you have things set up? And after I tell them, they'd say, well, can you help me set up the same thing? And I would, and that's kind of how I accidentally started a law firm, was just people asking me to help them set up what I had already set for myself. And that's where Royal Legal Solutions really was grown out of, sharing all the information, giving people the opportunity to either want to put something together for themselves, or that we could help them put it together. And then as I've grown my own network, my own net worth, my own assets into it, the level of the company continues to increase as, I've been reaching to higher and higher levels and pulling down those lessons from other people. And that's, our podcast, Real Estate Nerds. We have Grant Cardone and, all these guys from, Josh Dorkin and all the BiggerPockets guys and Rod Cleef, and pulling all of their lessons to say, okay, great, how can we create the map, for how people grow, just like I did in the very beginning. They continue to build this so we can get the game plan from the 0 to 25 million in total net worth. And that's what we're really about right now. It's where do you go that can actually teach how to do it and actually put it together? And what you need to put together at different stages is really different. And how do you build at the very beginning? You want that to last until the very end, so you don't have to redo things over time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that takes a high level of strategy and understanding of how things grow over time. So that's the long story of how I got into real estate investing and what I'm doing right now.
Awesome. Those are the best type of businesses that happen organically, just from putting value out for your own type of business, your own type of needs, and other people wanting that from you as well.
Yeah. I mean, it feels good to me. I feel like this is my big work, is in doing this type of work, because I've already hit the money game right into it. And all there's really left is the impact game, of what's the impact that I can have. And the biggest impact I think I can have, that we can have as a company, is how many people can we get financially free? How many people can we get to that level of financial freedom and to those levels of net worth? Because once you do that, you clear up the energy and the time for people than to focus on their families, focus on themselves, focus on the community. And then I can only do very little, but if I can empower a bunch of people to get free and to realize that the greatest gifts that we have in this world is how we can give back to other people and to come to that level of being, then maybe I'll have some type of lasting impact. And that's what I do through Royal Legal Solutions.
Love that, man. You mentioned some big names there: Grant Cardone, Josh Dorkin with BiggerPockets, and Rod Khleif. Those are three people that you've had on your own podcast?
Yeah, on Real Estate Nerds. And Real
Nice.
Estate Nerds is a podcast that's focused on, what's the best and worst deals and what people did or didn't do to make them there. And what we found out is that actually it's almost never the technical side of the deal. A very small percentage of what makes a deal successful is the technical side of the analysis of a deal. Come to find out that with really high-level investors or people that are experienced, they always get that part right. The part that seems to be variable that really determines whether things are successful or not successful is the mindset that goes in when you're getting into that deal. Because every deal that you make, you think is a good deal when you make it, right?
Sure.
So so the questions really become is, how can you think that this is a good deal, but then have an awareness that, hey, these other things are going on, that maybe I should pause for a second and give it a little bit of a deeper look. Maybe I should wait for a little bit while until I get higher levels of clarity on what's going on. So there's a deeper game that goes on. On one side of the coin, it's all the technical pieces. And the other side of the game is like, what's the mindset? Where am I at as, today? Am I making a decision that's based out of something else besides being clear and centered at the time that I get into that decision? And that's the conversation that we're having in Real Estate Nerds with the highest level people that I can get onto the show.
Yeah, that's amazing that you've got those guys on there. And I want to pick your brain for a second, just kind of best advice that you've got from them. From me personally, BiggerPockets, I'm not sure anything specifically it's coming to mind. Like one thing that I've learned from them that's been super helpful. Grant Cardone for me is just kind of like the thinking big mindset, obviously with like 10X sold or be sold. He's just really big. He's just good at explaining why having like a mindset of abundance and thinking big is super, super powerful and making it a numbers game. Rod Khleif, I actually did some goal setting type strategy where he talks about linking in like negative things or negative pain towards goals if you don't accomplish them. So those are two guys that I like to follow and have super, super high respect for and have gotten value from just listening to them on my own. But I'd be curious to hear from you, and I'll totally link Real Estate Nerds podcast in the show notes here for everybody to check out, because those sound like some very high quality interviews. But I'm curious, in addition to like the mindset that you just went through of going into a deal and kind of like being able to see both ends of it, like the absolute best case scenario, but also weighing out some potential negatives that come down the line, what would you say is some of the best advice that you picked up from those guys, Rod Khleif and Grant Cardone?
What seems to be the case that comes up time and time again is that there's two major pieces to it. So you'll never actually get Grant to say anything negative, by the way. He just doesn't. He's just overwhelmingly positive. So when you're talking to somebody that's like at Grant and that type of personality, which you have to realize it's all the things that he's not saying, right? That's actually where the lessons are. It's like negative art space, where it comes into it. And one of the things that I picked up from talking with Grant was that, when you're getting into a new deal, right? And you're getting into a new space, you can be the smartest guy out there, right? Like Grant, he looks at so many properties, does so much work, into it. He can just snap his fingers and say, okay, this is going to be a good deal or not. And he has the skills to be able to execute it. Now, Grant also super cognizant about how he has a huge team that does all of the vetting, right? He has a huge vetting process that goes with it, right? So yeah, can he do the deal identification? Yeah. Can he actually talk to the people to get everybody excited to want to do this deal? There seems to be a third piece where he says, well, I still need a crack team to make sure that this is going to work right into it. So it's like his blind spot is around the consistency of all of the details. He wants to be in the action mover seat, but not I don't want to have to go through and pick up all the details in the back end. So I built a team for that, right? So that's a piece where he'd say, okay, that would be like a weakness for him that he's built a team around to help him around. Rod Khleif, on the other hand, he shared a story about how he lost, I think, over $20 million in a downturn, right? And his story was around like, I had a blind spot to know that you could have a market correction. And what would happen in a market correction that would be like severe, and what that would mean for all the assets that I built. I wasn't thinking strategically. I was thinking only about how many assets and what my net worth could be, right? But not thinking how protected am I for having a reversal, right? And so what you see when people share through their pain of their stories that comes through is that oftentimes everything is going really well. People don't think about the downside risks. And that's where I focus in on it, right? And that's why I love hearing these stories from people, because I say, great, what we need to do if we're looking at, that's the long term of this game that we're playing, is downside risk. Why? Because life at whatever level, after you meet your basic needs, it doesn't matter how much more money you have, right? You're not actually any happier, right, from when you make more money. So what really causes us a lot of pain, stress, anxiety, strain in our relationships is the delta between the highs and the lows. That's where you feel it. It's the change between the two. So what smart strategic people do is they think, great, how can I smooth out the curves? I'll make the highs lower and I'll make the bottoms higher. So now I'm in a steady progression upward that I'm neither blowing up or going down. I'm just steadily rising to the top. What that means is actually things in your life become much more predictable, that you don't have big whipsaws that can ultimately end up bleeding over to your relationships, right? Because you're emotionally stressed by your monetary and your finances, right? And you can continue to work and build strategically around how do you free up your free time? How do you create the passive cash flow to be able to meet all of your expenses? How do you only invest 70% of your loan to value into your properties? That way you can know that even if there's a market correction, that I'm still going to be able to cash flow. And I'm not going to end up having to lose those assets like Rod Cleef did, right, into it. And those are the kinds of lessons that we're picking up through the Real Estate Nerds podcast, and being like, okay, this is actually what it means to live a good life. Think strategically through your assets, but then how do your assets and how do you build your business, and how does that relate to your relationships? How does it relate to your need for adventure and excitement? How does it relate to your desire to be able to give back to your community? And think of these things holistically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that jives with us very, very well, because this podcast is very holistic as far as putting your life, how you want that to be, and just your overall well-being at the forefront, along with your real estate investing business. That jives really well. Definitely will link in your podcast there. And as you know, Scott, most of our listeners are fix and flippers or wholesalers. So I want to talk a little bit about what's a strategy for setting up long-term wealth for these folks that may have a handful of rentals. Maybe they have a significant rental portfolio already, or they're somewhere along that pathway. And I guess we could start out just with what you would suggest, probably like how to structure different entities or businesses, everything around that. If they are assuming they already have income coming in from just the one-off wholesale assignments or fix and flip type deals.
Yeah, so I'm going to give you guys, and for everybody, just buckle up. Here's like 2 to 3 minutes of just like some hot, like I'm going to go through this pretty quick, right? So if you have to go back and listen to it, then that's fine. But I want to make sure that you guys get the whole narrative in one cohesive segment, because you can always replay this podcast, right?
Exactly.
And it's going to be specific for somebody that's in wholesaling. Maybe you've started to build on some of your active income, which I call that's when you start trading time for money, right? That's your active income. I use the term passive income, which is money that comes as mailbox money, usually from an asset, single family homes, multifamily, et cetera, coming into it. And then, so here's what you got to do, right? 90 seconds. 2 things. One is that you always will have an asset holding company that's going to hold all of your assets for you. So you rich people don't own things, they don't pay taxes. So the first thing you got to do is pull all of your assets into an asset holding company. Ideally, what we want that to be is an anonymous company, because if it doesn't look like you own assets, that's how you stop lawsuits before they start. You want to look like you qualify for food stamps. The way you do that is actually using trust structures and other structures that are formed through an attorney. So not only is your name pulled off the public record, but because it's formed through an attorney, all the information is also protected by the attorney-client privilege. So step 1 is create an anonymous asset holding company, move all the assets into the anonymous asset holding company. Of your choices of anonymous asset holding companies, you can use either just an individual LLC and push everything to there, or if you're more sophisticated, what you want to use is a series LLC formed in Delaware, Texas, Nevada, or Wyoming, and then use that series LLC to own assets everywhere else in the country. Series LLC essentially allows you to operate with one bank account, one EIN number, one tax return. What makes it special is that parent company that you form can create an infinite number of what's called a child series of the series LLC. These act just like entities, except they're free. So you get an infinitely scalable company that doesn't cost you anything more as it scales, and it doesn't increase in complexity of operations as it scales either, because you can operate everything through one bank account as long as you have accounting records that tag the income and expenses for each of the individual child series. If you have assets like real estate, what you can do then is move that asset into a land trust. Moving it into a land trust creates the anonymity. It also avoids the due on sale clause with that. That land trust is in turn owned by an individual child series of the series LLC, which means now the asset's compartmentalized for liability purposes. So we own the asset anonymously. That asset's now compartmentalized for liability. So if there's ever a lawsuit against that asset, they can't go after any of your other assets and they can't go after you. Additionally, if somebody sues you, they can't go after any of your assets because you don't own anything more, your LLC does. If somebody sees that in the chain of title that you had this property and it's transferred into a trust, if they guess that, they actually guess wrong because you don't own the asset anymore. A trust does, and that trust is in turn owned by the child series of the series LLC. And that's your asset holding company. That's the only thing you need for an asset holding company is a structure that's like that. The other side of the coin, which is if that's your left hand, your right hand is a completely separate standalone entity. That's your operating company. It does all of your active business, but it doesn't hold any assets. If you're a wholesaler, you need to be operating through an operating company. Reason why is two things. One, you're in an active business, which means that there's liability for any of the communications you're making through email, text messages, contracts. All of those things have potential liability associated with them that insurance won't protect you from. Reason why you also have to have that is because if somebody sues you, even if they can't get to your assets, they can hurt your credit score, which is your ability to do business and to be able to acquire more assets. So you must protect your credit score. If you're looking into I'm in the wealth building game, if you're on the wealth building track and the financial freedom track. Second reason why you need a separate operating company apart from the liability protection is you can use different tax elections with that LLC. Have it taxed as an S corp is a great thing to do to be able to save you money on what your income is going to be. So if you're making anywhere between $0 and $132,000 a year, you have that LLC taxed as an S corporation, as an S corporation tax election, which helps you avoid self-employment tax. You can also use strategies like solo 401ks and self-directed IRAs as retirement accounts to shelter up to $56,000 to $62,000 a year from taxes. And with that money, you can use those retirement accounts to self-direct them, and you can buy more assets with tax-free dollars and have tax-free gains inside of those retirement accounts. And I'm done. That's a clip.
Very cool. So you guys can go back and listen to that. I'll also get with Scott, I'm sure, on some resources that will explain both legs or arms there, if you will, as far as the assets and then the operations. The assets almost sounds kind of like Inception, where it's just a box inside of a box inside of a box that can't really be identified or linked back to you, which helps with kind of like inbound type, if somebody's going after you, something like that for one of your properties. And the operations is kind of just a sneaky, not sneaky, but a militant, methodical type way of just being able to shelter more of your hard-earned money that you guys are accumulating here.
It's really sheltering out what are your risks, right? That come in. Remember we talked about that it's not the highs and it's the high. You got to keep the highs and the lows up and down. You can't really stop anybody from suing you, right? Mm-hmm. But if you take the proactive steps ahead of time, what you can do is put yourself in such a strong position that they don't want to sue you. They'll just go sue somebody else. What you have to remember is that this game is always about attorneys. It's usually about attorneys trying to make money by finding somebody that has a lawsuit that they want to file, right? Mm-hmm. So what you got to do is make this a really bad business decision. Because you don't have to be, it's like having a friend, right? Where you guys are both in the woods. You don't got to be faster than the bear. You just got to be faster than your friend.
Yeah.
It's the same kind of thing with lawsuits. You just got to be a little bit harder to eat than the next guy.
Love it. One thing I want to touch on really quick, which may be the most applicable tax or potentially getting sued question here, just in wholesaling specifically, and I'd love to hear your opinion on it, is text message marketing. Unsolicited text message marketing. Have you dealt with any clients or heard anything as far as people getting sued doing mass text message marketing just to elicit data? Because that seems like it's just a hot discussion in our internal group and in wholesaling groups, things like that, because relatively it's a very lean marketing expense, and you can cast a wide net just doing text blast marketing to a list of 1,000, 5,000, 10,000, doesn't matter how big your list is. hit a lot of people, but I've heard some horror stories of people getting dinged for that and sued for that.
Yeah, Carlos, do you know of any other companies or agencies that do that type of work that do it really well?
As far as like text blasting providers,
Yeah. Yeah.
I know of a handful. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, is that something that like they run into with like getting hit with lawsuits onto it on like
I
a
think
corporate
some
level, or is it?
I think some users. I'm not sure how much of it is the provider versus the operator who's doing it. That's what I've heard. I've heard of like the real estate company that's using it because I'm sure that there is some type of legal agreement when signing up for the platform. Some do market themselves, the companies, as like TCPA compliant, where you can use them and they have a lawyer that signs off on it, everything like that. But I've only heard of real estate operators and their team getting in trouble instead of like the text message provider.
Yeah, that's where I was getting at, right? It's about the TCPA compliant providers, right? So when I'm looking at anything where I think that there's significant liability and I'm an individual, right? Like I'm a wholesaler, right? I'll never do that on my own into it, right? Why? Because it's extremely expensive for me to learn what all of the risks are and to mitigate them appropriately and to monitor any changes, right? If you think about it like, well, where am I investing my time? It's probably not in trying to look into compliance
Yeah.
as an early stage entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
So what I'll always do is I'll hire an agency to be able to conduct any of those affairs on my behalf, right? And say, great, now I can leverage into the agency, the one being like truly at risk if anything goes wrong here. Because what I want is somebody that gets mad at whatever, right? I don't want them suing me. I want them suing like a corporation or a business, right? Because those have much bigger pockets. They're going to be much more excited to go sue that company than they are ever going to be to sue me. Mm-hmm. And that's the value of bringing other people like that on board, right? It's one of the reasons too, when I'm looking at anything that I think there's some risk associated with it, and I'm like, this is a pretty big gray area for me on what are we doing here in terms of like tax or legal, right? I'll always hire other attorneys to come in to approve that transaction or to architect that transaction for me, even though I could do it on my own. And most of the reason why is going to say, well, I want somebody else whose sole job it is to make sure that goes right. And if it goes wrong, they're backed up by an insurance policy, right? That says, okay, great. Well, then I have a remedy of something I can do if it blows up, and it's not going to blow back up on me. Again, because this game is built on smoothing out the curves, right? It's not about how do I actually get the most. It's about how do I smooth out the curve and have consistent gains over time, and I incrementally improve my speed of consistent gains. I don't ever look for the huge home run wins. Or if I do, it's very rare. They just fall in your lap kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same principle with the analogy of you and your friend running away from a bear. You're kind of not completely getting out of it, but just having someone between you, kind of like flares you could put off on a jet. If someone's shooting at you, you can kind of just deploy some flares. Those blow up instead of blowing up a plane.
Yeah, and so the game that you look at is the way to rethink about this game is a lot of like the same ways that we think through taxes, right? So I gave you guys that S corporation tax selection strategy. So if you're anywhere between $0 to $132,000 a year that you can save on self-employment taxes by just having an S corporation tax selection to be able to avoid self-employment tax because you're going to split your income between dividend income from your company and employee wages, right? Cool, awesome strategy, right? With those kinds of things, those are tried and tested strategies that every CPA in the world uses, right? When we started getting into like a new field or a new area, that'll be like, okay, great. Well, we want to do something with like conservation easements, or we want to be starting to look at how we're going to incorporate like an offshore insurance policy to be able to buy assets, right? For my higher net worth clients that are like 10 million plus in net worth, those are always things that you want to have somebody else that knows about that. And I'll hire somebody else that knows more about that than me, because my core value is not in trying to learn that thing super well. It's in my core value is how can I help more people get to the next level. And so that's where, even though I can learn something, I won't. I'll say, great, because I'll just find the right person, have them come in, move the dial for me there. So I can stay on like, what's my most effective dollar per hour type of activity? And that's the metric I use as a KPI. It's like, what's my most effective dollar per hour? And I get really intense about that and knowing what that's going to be. And what the beautiful thing for me in my life is that my most effective dollar per hour thing is being able to talk to more people, which I love to do, and to help them have realizations about, okay, where do they need to be looking to get to the next stage of worth for them, right? So if you're going to put a KPI on this, that's what the KPI would look for. It's like, what's my true effective dollar per hour?
Love that. We have a graphic that we print out and ship to our members' offices, and it's essentially exactly that, valuing your time on an hourly basis. So anything from like $5 per hour tasks, which you can outsource to a VA or an admin, all the way to $10,000 an hour, which is personal development, talking to people, high relationship building, stuff like that. So I think that's a great litmus test for, evaluating next steps that you're going to take, or projects that you're potentially going to take on, and what role you would have in them, is valuing your time. Pretty much exactly what you just outlined there.
Yeah, that's exactly it, right? I mean, and I think that's a great thing to have, is like these physical. A lot of people are really into the digital space for everything that they want in terms of a resource. I would also recommend for everybody, like what we have, and if you go to the royallegalsolutions.com website, on the very front page, you'll see like a big temple. And we call it our Freedom Temple, because it's our highest level outline of how do you become financially free. And if you read the temple from top to bottom, it shows you like the first thing you need to do is your wealth creation. That's your ROI, right? The second thing you would want to focus on is what's my tax strategy, because the biggest thief out there is actually the government. So you have to protect yourself from taxes. Next thing you're going to look through is your 5 pillars of asset protection. You look at anonymity, separation, compartmentalization, how to use insurance appropriately. And then you'll look through time leverage, which your legacy planning, and how do you look at personal fulfillment. So you have this graphic that gives you a map to say, these are the things I need to be focusing on. And you can ask yourself the question when you look at these graphics, like the one that you mentioned, Carlos, and the Freedom Temple that we have there, is to have those printed out, or have a poster of it, right? Or something that you physically see every day, and just ask yourself the question, where am I at today? What do I want at today on this, right? And get that 1 to 3 things super clear of where you're at. So you can always just be, it doesn't actually matter what the decision you make is, as long as you're making the decision consciously. You actually ask yourself the question, right? Like that's the game. The game is having triggers that you can create for yourself that make you ask the right questions of yourself. You have awareness about what it is that you're doing. And like, just like you're talking about there, just like the Freedom Temple that we have, these are things that I always say, print them out, put them out there, look at them every day, because they're going to instill in you that habit that highly successful people do. Highly successful people, if you look at Tribe of Millionaires, or if you look at the other work that Tim Ferriss does with interviewing super high net worth, super high powerful people, their systems for success are usually very simple. And they're usually based around 3 to 5 questions that they, for whatever they're doing, and whatever they think their highest value is, their dollar effective hour KPI that they've seen, they're like, this is the thing I need to do to be really good at, to move the dial in my life. There's usually only 3 to 5 questions that they ask themselves that all relate back into how do they drive the analysis for what they need to be doing with the KPI. Now, what that takes is high levels of clarity of what is your dollar effective per hour activity, and then the 5 most powerful questions that you could be asking yourself to drive you in that direction into it. So, but it all comes back down to graphics and images a lot of times, because those are the things that we find engaging as just human beings. So highly, highly, highly recommend get the right images, start physically looking at the right stuff every day. And you'll just notice that over time, you'll start to change your behavior, start to change your internal dialogue to be able to help drive you to the next level.
100%, man. That's how the brain apparently picks up a lot of meaning and impressions into it, is through like just simple images. And that's some of the stuff I'm most interested in, is kind of like intentionally programming your behavior and automating yourself, essentially.
That's it.
Which is super cool.
That's it. And your environment, you can create and be strategic and intentional about the environment of the things that you're looking at without having to actually try to like willpower the change in your behavior. Because if you just create the right environment, you'll naturally kind of trick yourself into thinking better. Does that make sense? I know it's kind of crazy, but this stuff actually works with kids. If you ever study Montessori education, they actually talk about that you don't need to sit kids down in desks to actually talk to them and teach them like with a blackboard. What they do is they have like bookshelves of all these materials, and you train the kids of how to use the materials, and the kids do self-guided exploration with the materials by creating the environment. So the whole theory of the education is based around the fact that the right environment will actually guide the behaviors that you're looking for into it. So you don't need to focus on the behavior, you need to focus on the environment.
Love it. To answer your question, does it make sense? 100% does, because this is stuff that I'm like most interested in, and even some stuff that I teach in our 80/20 Investor Academy that I mentioned before. A lot of like mindset and being intentional around that environment, all that good stuff. So this is surprisingly turned into a very awesome interview. Talk about this stuff, and I'm on your site. I'm on your site now, just looking at the graphic. So I want to make sure that I have that in the show notes for folks to check out. But that's awesome that you're in
Yeah,
here. So you
I'd
have
love to do
graphics for everything.
more with that, Carlos. I mean, we have tons and tons of graphics because this stuff is really, it's really like theoretical, and but until you get it into a visual format, right? And then once it's in a visual format, now like tax, law, all of these pieces, guides, maps become really much more concrete. It's something I was thinking about too, that is about everybody. One of the things I wanted to do was say, hey, everybody that comes in, that fills out like our quiz that we do, that has all of our basic information to know if you're a good person to talk to, or if how we can help somebody that's like you and have like a productive conversation on that first conversation, which is one of our goals, is to maybe get everybody's home address or something like that and ship them like a poster of the Freedom Temple or something like that.
I love that.
Yeah, would that be
yeah, absolutely, man. That'd be awesome.
Okay.
That'd be awesome. And I'm on the site here too. I see, and I know that your media team sent this over too, as far as like some quizzes they could take, different type of investor, a lot of different webinars. So yeah, man, he's got a ton of different stuff here that's free for you guys to check out. In addition to it looks like the podcast is linked right on here as well.
Yeah.
So I'll be send all this over for you.
What we tried to do is create like a website that's almost like a choose your own adventure story.
Mm-hmm.
It's like whatever type of investor you're at, like when you get to the homepage, you're able to clearly identify, oh, that's me. And then when you click on that, it's personalized. Like what's the asset protection, the tax, the strategy, the whatnot that relates to you as a type of investor that we've said, here's the best practices that we've seen from the thousands of investors that we work with. And we're going to distill it all in because it's all a little bit different for each type of investor, right? So each type of person that's making money in real estate has a little bit different to the model. The high level concepts are the same, separate the assets from the operations, act like rich people, et cetera. How does it actually get to a technical format? That's the choose your own adventure start part of the royallegalsolutions.com website, is like how that all gets documented out.
Amazing. So I'll have that for you guys to definitely check out. I guess to start wrapping this up, I want to ask, what is your future looking like? You have a ton of stuff that's focused on legacy planning, a lot of future-paced ideology and theory. I'm curious with you, who has a successful podcast, talks to a lot of people, is amplifying your message, multiplying your message. I'm just curious, with you having so much success, what does your future legacy look like, and what do you want to be doing really the rest of your life in business? And like we said, the most important thing is quality of life, that type of stuff.
Yeah, so we have a team. I have a team of about 30 people, right now. We're home based here in Austin, Texas, and we help, people all over the country with it. And so one of the things that was really important to me that we've accomplished in the last 12 months is that I've been able to actually be able to no parts of the company are actually dependent on me. So even if I get hit by a bus, everything with Royal Legal is built with system and process to continue on and with it. So that means that now I have an enduring legacy to it, right? The company itself will survive based upon the culture and systems and processes that we put together as like a team, right? Mm-hmm. So the next level for me into this, and that we're working on now, is one, how can I amplify that? Who are more people that are amazing people that I can bring in to my team to start helping people more quickly and predictably grow from 0 to 25 million in net worth? How can I empower other people like coaches that will have 4 new shows they're going to be launching here in the next 2 months. One will be on syndications, one will be on cash flow. Another one will be actually on how to use financing and all the different financing types that you can create with your real estate investing and business financing. And the level that we're going into with these types of coaching is to say, how can I empower other people who are wicked smart and good at their field that don't have all of the business acumen to necessarily build all of the infrastructure that's needed to really share a message, and empower more people to have a platform to be able to share better through podcasting, article writing, and be able to develop their own curriculum and housing it all inside of Royal Legal, so that we were able to have this cohesive community of coaches and high power people that can then share all of their information for free with everybody. So if that's something that's interesting to you, Carlos, or anybody listening to this program, all you got to do is just sign up for the Royal Legal Solutions newsletter, fill out any of the things that we have there, and we'll be sending you information about when we have these new people launching, what they're going to be talking about, et cetera, if you want to check that out.
Awesome. Yeah. I'll have that in the show notes, royallegalsolutions.com. Scott, been awesome to get to know you, man. Hopefully we can stay in touch to collab on some stuff. Thank you guys for checking out this episode. I'm sure you'll be able to spend a day there yourself on royallegalsolutions.com, take some quizzes, check out some different stuff as far as leveraging your time, legacy planning, a bunch of good stuff on there.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's really a pleasure being here with you, Carlos. And it's I always love talking about these topics. Most of what we do is really in the nuts and bolts of how do we actually execute, right? And into it, right? But you got to know the high level strategy, and you got to know why to think a particular way, because there's so much conflicting information that's out there, and all of those things can be true, right? So what it really takes is actually you need a mentor or a guide or somebody else in your life that's actually walked the path that you're looking to walk, that can help show you what are the pitfalls or what are all the ideas that you think are great that aren't actually that great, right? To help you avoid those things. So whether that's having a relationship with you, Carlos, whether it's a relationship with Royal Legal Solutions, whether it's a relationship with anybody, I just encourage everybody to do that. Don't try to do anything on your own. Find somebody else that's already done it before. Get that person onto your team, find a relationship with them, et cetera, and have that person. And I love to be able to connect with anybody that wants to think that we might be a good fit for them, is even interested in just having a conversation. There's no obligation to have that conversation to see, are you a good fit, or are you somebody that we can help? What are the types of ways that we could help you? Even some of those might not be profitable for us, but we're in the helping people game, not in the profitability game. And the best way to do that is actually the royallegalsolutions.com. Go to the very top where it says to take a quiz. Take that quiz, and on that quiz page, you're going to see that I put everything I know about all the things that we talked about here in the show into video format. It's an hour and 45 minutes of video content, absolutely for free. It's all of my content, every single thing I would ever tell a paying client. Into it is all there, and you get it all for free without paying a penny for it. And all you got to do is just go to royallegalsolutions.com, click the take a quiz at the top, and you get, I would say it's at least worth $5,000 to $10,000 in content on that page.
Love it. Wise words from a very decent man, giving out free value. Definitely check that out, guys, and we may be hearing from Scott again soon.
Awesome, Carlos. Have a great day, brother. Thank you.
You too, man. Appreciate you.